Okay, today I've got a little exercise for you. I suppose it's more than just an exercise. It's a super effective fretboard knowledge and technique workout that brings together what I consider to be all of the most important tools that you need as a guitar player and as a musician in terms of chords and scales and arpeggios and the way that you connect all of those things together and understand the fretboard. And I'm going to require from you some concentration, a bit of hard work, and I'm not going to guarantee that this is going to be the funnest thing you've ever done on the guitar, but it is going to be good for you. And the kind of stuff that I'm going to be talking about are the fundamental building blocks for all kinds of different styles of music. And I'm pitching this video at a kind of intermediate level player. If you're not quite at that stage, there's still going to be some stuff here that you can work on. You might just like to start with smaller chunks of the entire exercise. And likewise, if you're more of an advanced player, you can use the exercise just as a way of revising and staying sharp on these basic concepts, or you can adapt the exercise to include some more advanced materials. So the basic idea is this: we've got a 5-minute or so guitar workout, and we're going to be using the CAGED system to organize these materials. And in each of the 5 CAGED zones of the fretboard, we're going to be drilling all of these most important chords, scales and arpeggios. Now, I'm not going to go into a full beginner's explanation of the CAGED system in this particular video. I'm going to assume you already know the basics of this. I've covered those in previous videos. But the CAGED system for me is really fundamental to the way I understand the guitar. I know there are critics of the CAGED system. Sometimes they've got some valid points, and sometimes personally I like to supplement the CAGED system with other ways of viewing the fretboard, but for me it always comes back to CAGED. I just think it's the most complete way of understanding the guitar fretboard. Okay, enough talking, Adrian. Let's actually get on with this exercise, shall we? And the first thing we're going to need to do is choose a key, and for this video it's going to be in the key of G. Eventually, once you know this exercise, this workout, you can do it of course in all 12 keys, and that's something I recommend. But for today it's just going to be in the key of G. It falls nicely on the fretboard and it's a very common key. So we're going to begin here in the first CAGED pattern, or the first CAGED zone of the fretboard. So in the key of G you've got this G major bar chord shape. You can see that that's derived from the open E chord shape. So this can be described as the E form of the CAGED system. I tend to prefer to call the CAGED patterns just by number, so I would call this pattern 1 or shape 1 of the CAGED system. And the first thing I want us to do is to find and play the octave shape that defines this CAGED zone of the fretboard. This is the most important starting point when it comes to CAGED, I think, is this little octave shape which really defines this area of the fretboard. So in pattern 1, in the E form, we've got a G note here, and then we've got another one 2 frets higher and a string skip over, and then we've got another one here on the top string at the 3rd fret. So this creates a little triangle. So that's our octave shape, and this is what is defining this CAGED zone. And this octave shape, for me, it's the framework onto which we can place all of the other stuff that I'm going to be discussing in this video. So the first part of the exercise is just to play that octave shape up and down. And don't just do this stuff mindlessly. You want to be thinking about the location of those G notes and visualizing that pattern on the fretboard. And once we've got that framework, we're now going to be playing some other stuff. So next thing is we're going to strum the major chord shape, which is just going to be our G major bar chord. And then I want us to play the G major arpeggio. So just a triad, a 3-note arpeggio. We're going to play those notes in order from low to high. Now in a G chord we've got the root note, obviously G, then we've got a B, which is the 3rd, and then a D, which is the 5th. So we can go G, B, D, and then we can do that again, G, B, D, and then another G on top, and then we can descend. So that's our G major arpeggio. Just play that up and down. And you can see how those notes are kind of hung on to this octave shape kind of a framework. We've got the octave shape in there, but we're also adding in the B and the D. So it's in this CAGED zone, and we've kind of visualizing that arpeggio around the octave shape. Next, let's throw in some more notes, and I want us to play the G major pentatonic scale. So G, A, B, D, E, and we're going to play that in the next octave as well. So see how that works visually on the fretboard. We've got the notes of the arpeggio, the root, third and fifth. Now we're including the A and the E as well, so the second and the sixth, and that's what gives us the major pentatonic scale. And we could take that further by adding in 2 more notes, and then we've got the complete G major scale. So we've got all of this stuff that's related and connected together in this caged zone. This is the important concept here, is that in each area of the fretboard you've got all of these really fundamental musical materials right there under your fingers, and you can automatically recall them and use them to make music, which is ultimately what this is all about. So that's all of the most important major stuff in this area of the fretboard. Let's now go minor, and we could play a G minor bar chord like this, and then we could go through the same kind of materials, but think in a minor key. So we could play a G minor arpeggio. So now we've got a root, a flat third, which is a B flat, and then the fifth. So G minor arpeggio, G minor pentatonic. And then adding in 2 more notes for the G natural minor scale. So going to call out every single note in all of these chord scales and arpeggios, but there is going to be a detailed tab workbook available on my Patreon page if you want to kind of go through the details of some of these shapes. So now we've got the complete exercise in this zone of the fretboard. So just to recap, we started with the octave shape, then we had the major chord, major arpeggio, major pentatonic, major scale, then we went minor, so we played the minor chord, minor arpeggio, minor pentatonic, and the full natural minor scale. So let's put all of that together. And it might take a little bit of time to get all of that under your fingers, but once you have got all of that stuff under your fingers, then you can start drilling this information. And I'd recommend as soon as possible just playing through this entire exercise in time, either tapping your foot or using a metronome. So let me just do that now. Okay, so 75 beats per minute, and I'm just going to begin with the octave shape. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to play the major chord. 2, 3, 4. Major arpeggio. Major pentatonic. Major scale. Go minor, so the minor chord, 3, 4, minor arpeggio, minor pentatonic, and the natural minor scale. So that's the idea, just trying to play that nice and cleanly in time with the metronome, smoothly going from one idea to the next. Now, guess what? We're just going to take that through the remaining 4 caged areas of the fretboard. So if this is the E form, the next zone of the fretboard is going to be here. This is the D form. So starting with our octave shape, we just got G note here and here, and then the major chord is going to look like this. This is derived from our open D major chord. We'll play it like this, and then we can play the D major arpeggio. the stuff in this position might be a little bit less familiar to some of you, so you might need to take your time getting these shapes under your fingers. These are the fingerings that I would tend to use. Sometimes you've got some alternative options where you can play a note on a different string or something like that, but so it's up to you if you want to tweak some of these things, but that's how I would play a G major arpeggio in this zone of the fretboard. And another important point, as soon as you get into some of the other caged areas of the fretboard, you find that here this G note is on the 4th string. We've got some strings down below that root note that we need to include. So I would always strongly recommend starting and finishing all of this stuff on the lowest available root note. So I'm not starting here on the lowest available note in this pattern. I'm actually starting and ending on this root note. So going up to the highest note in the arpeggio, descending down below the root. That's the lowest note available in this caged zone of the fretboard, and then climbing up and finishing on the root again. That way you're hearing it as a G major arpeggio, you're not hearing it as an inversion or something else. Next we could play the G major pentatonic scale, which would look like this. And again, check the tab if you're not familiar with some of these finger shapes. And then we could play the full G major scale. Starting and ending on that root note. Let's go minor. So we could play our minor chord shapes. Obviously the octave shape is in common between major and minor, but we've got a different chord shape now. This is like a D minor chord we've got here. So that's our G minor chord shape. The G minor arpeggio would look like this. And the G minor pentatonic. G natural minor scale. Starting and finishing on that root note there, you might notice that this finger shape is the same as the major scale shape that we had down here. It's like a B flat major scale, but I don't want to hear it as B flat major. I want to be hearing it as G minor, so it's important to be starting and finishing on that root note. So that's the complete exercise in the next caged zone of the fretboard. Moving on to the next caged zone, and apologies if I'm kind of rattling through this information quite quickly. There's a lot to get through in this video. Again, check the tab if you need to, or slow down the video, and don't feel that you need to take on board all of this information at once if a lot of this stuff is new to you. So the next zone here is the C form. Here's the octave shape. Got 10 on the 5th string and 8 on the 2nd string, and around that octave shape we can hang all of this other information. So the major chord, this is like our C, our movable C chord shape. You can see it's derived from our C chord here, so that's a nice chord shape, that one. Our major arpeggio looks like this, and you can just go down below the root note. You've got that low D, and then finishing on the root. Major pentatonic, and then the full G major scale, and then we can go minor. So the minor chord shape, I mean, you could, it's a little bit awkward playing the minor chord shape in this caged area. You do find that with cages that not everything works equally well in each of these areas. So you could play this shape here, so 10, 8, 7 and 8. I find that a little bit awkward. Perhaps you could just play the triad there. That's perfectly acceptable, just to play, you know, a portion of a bigger chord shape if it's a little bit awkward. But there's our G minor, and then our G minor arpeggio would look like this. G minor pentatonic, and then the full G natural minor scale, and into the 10th position. This is the A form. So the octave shape is once again 10 on the 5th string, but now we're moving the other way. We're going up to 12 on the 3rd string. So octave shape, and then we've got the G major chord, the A form bar chord, the arpeggio, and then the major pentatonic, and the major scale, starting and finishing on that root note. Let's go minor. There's G minor, the G minor arpeggio. Looks like that. G minor pentatonic is, of course, like this. And then the G natural minor scale. And then we're into the final caged zone of the fretboard. We're in the 12th position in the key of G. So the octave shape looks like this. We've got 15 on the 6th string, 12 on the 3rd string, and 15 on the 1st string. So it's another 3 note. A couple of these caged octave shapes have 3 notes. Some of them just have 2 notes. This is kind of a triangle pointing in that direction of the fretboard is the way that I like to think of it. And the chord is going to be this one, which is, again, a slightly awkward chord to play. It's like a G bar chord, so it's a little bit of a tricky to play it this high up the fretboard. But it can be a useful chord shape. But again, you could just play part of that, just play a triad or a middle part or top part of that chord shape. Then we've got the arpeggio, major pentatonic scale, and then the major scale. And then we can go minor, and the minor chord in this zone of the fretboard, there's not really a kind of an obvious one to play, so you might just play partial minor chord there, just a minor triad perhaps, or the top part of that chord shape. But we do have the arpeggio, which looks like that, and then the minor pentatonic scale, and then the natural minor scale. And that's it. I realise I'm whizzing through a lot of this information quite quickly. If you are more of a beginner or an early intermediate player, that might be a little bit too fast. You might want to rewatch this video, slow it down, and just take your time with it. There's no need to sort of think that you have to learn all of this stuff right away. But if you are more of an intermediate or advanced player, I'm sure a lot of this information is already familiar to you. And it's a bit of a review of some of this fundamental information. But you certainly want to get to that stage where all of this stuff is right there under your fingers in the muscle memory, and you can instantly recall this stuff in any given area of the fretboard. So, and once you do know all of this stuff, it's actually quite a quick exercise to play. If you get the metronome going and you just play these things one after the other continuously, going through all of the caged zones, then you can easily play the entire exercise in about 5 minutes. And of course you're going to want to play in other keys as well. You don't have to do all of that in one sitting. A good idea might be to do a different key every practice session, and that way you're practicing in all 12 keys, but you're not spending an hour on a single exercise. So there we are. I was going to say, I hope you enjoy learning and practicing this exercise, but let's be honest, this isn't necessarily going to be an enjoyable thing, but it is a very valuable thing to be working on as a musician. So I hope you find it helpful, and that it overall improves your musicianship. And it's not primarily a technique exercise, but there's certainly a strong technical element to this exercise. If you are playing it in time with a metronome, you've got to be accurate, and picking some of those arpeggios and things crossing between strings, it does demand quite a lot of technique and control. And as I said at the start of this video, if you are more of an advanced player, feel free to adapt this exercise to include more advanced stuff. So you could easily include seventh arpeggios, different chord types, different scales, so modes, harmonic minor, melodic minor, diminished scales, whatever you like can be brought under the umbrella of the CAGED system. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope this exercise proves useful to you. Have I already mentioned that there is a high quality detailed tab for the entire workout available on my Patreon page? Pay what you like to get access to that. Check it out if you're interested. Thanks for watching. See you next time.